Good evening. My name is Bill Martin, and I have the pleasure and privilege to direct the drug policy program here at the Baker Institute. We're expecting more people to come. I think everybody here is aware that we just observed the 25th year of the bringing down of the Berlin Wall. And there's a piece of the Berlin Wall out here on the corner, and at our home, we have a small piece of the Berlin Wall that somebody brought us shortly after it went down, and I'm fairly certain that most of the rest of it is blocking roads getting here off of the freeway, along the areas in Southampton. This is should be eight minutes away. It was 25 minutes this morning. After I passed up the streets I knew to be impassable and went on to one that turned out also to be nearly impassable. But anyway, very happy that you're here, and I think we're looking forward to a very stimulating evening. Efforts to change the laws regarding cannabis fall into three broad categories: decriminalization, legalization for recreational use, and legal production, dispensing, and use of cannabis for therapeutic purposes, commonly known as medical marijuana. Decriminalization can include such measures as reducing the status of possession from a felony to a misdemeanor or to a violation comparable to a traffic ticket, with corresponding reduction in penalties. Over the past 40 years, Texas, for example, has reduced simple possession of small amounts from a felony that could result in a 10-year prison sentence to a Class B misdemeanor that has a maximum of 180 days in jail, a $2,000 fine. But in most cases, offenders receive probation attached to various requirements, particularly for early violations. That is no small thing in itself, but it is decriminalizing from what it once was. Other states have decriminalized in other ways. Decriminalization is a significant advance over policies based on prohibition and punishment. But as long as cultivation and sale remain illegal, criminals decide whom and what to sell, to whom and what to sell, and they get to keep the money. Legalization for recreational use has faced much greater resistance, but Colorado and Washington broke through that in 2012, and Alaska, Oregon, and the District of Columbia legalized recreational use just last week on November the 4th. Using cannabis for therapeutic reasons has enjoyed far greater approval. 23 states and the District of Columbia have some system of medical marijuana. A ballot measure in Florida last week failed to get 60% of the needed vote, or 60% of the vote that was needed to pass, but it got 58%, which was more than the winning candidate for governor. In a poll conducted by the University of Texas and the Texas Tribune earlier this year, 77% of respondents were open to some form of legal access to cannabis for therapeutic purposes. It is likely that the Texas Legislature will be asked to consider bills in all three of these categories: decriminalization, recreational use, and medical use. Medical use clearly has the broadest support, but is Texas really ready for legal medical marijuana? That's a question we are here to consider tonight. Our program will provide 8 perspectives on this issue, including a grower and a dispenser in a legal system, New Mexico, a physician, an academic analyst, a veteran legislator, a movement advocate and coordinator, and 3 speakers whose interest in the topic is deeper than political, economic, scientific, and analytical concerns. For them, access to legal therapeutic cannabis is a matter of vital personal importance to their lives, even a matter of life and death. Now, we've scheduled 2 hours for this program. I hope that will include some time for Q&A. It will be tight, but I've asked each of the speakers to keep their remarks within tight limits. To save time, I'm not going to provide a long introduction to each of the speakers. You have the program in your hands, and there's no need for me to read it to you. I presume that all of you read at grade level, perhaps above. In my case, for example, I'm 76, but I read at an 81-year-old level. But I will say a bit about each one. Our first speaker to keynote this event is Leslie Grady McAhren. She is an amazing young woman. She was among the first people licensed to grow and dispense therapeutic cannabis in New Mexico. She has set out with a conscious intent to be one of the leading experts on therapeutic cannabis in the world. As the program notes, she is now teaching an accredited continuing medical education courses for physicians. Leslie's going to talk to us about the current state of therapeutic cannabis in the United States.
Good evening, everyone. I just coming this evening to speak about some very tiny subjects. Little ideas like health, safety, and freedom when it comes to cannabis. All extremely manageable and small. My name is Leslie Grady McAhren. I am an alum of the beautiful Rice University. Thank you for hosting me, Rice and Professor Martin. It's a true pleasure to be back at the alma mater speaking to you all. Naturally, I will begin with a shout out to Team Weiss. There is no Team Weiss here tonight. That's disappointing. The notion here is that we're really at the intersection of policy and medicine. So I want you to think about this all really with two ideas in mind, two conceptual perspectives. So the first is harm reduction. It's really about doing as much good and as little harm as possible at every turn. Kind of like visiting a national forest, I describe it. Harm reduction is really about having strategies that reduce negative consequences associated with drug use. So it's where actual medicine meets the law. The other thing, because we're at an academic institution, I think it's interesting to have a lens on who's attracted to drug policy and what's interesting to these people. So harm reduction itself, I think, is a very cool idea. Everybody in medical cannabis should be familiar with it. In this case, it's really drug policy / public health. You can't make moves on drug policy without thinking how it will impact everyone. And literally everyone, from the unborn child to the hospice patient on their deathbed. The classic example of harm reduction, for those who may not be familiar, is the idea of needle exchange. It's where you would get a clean needle if you're a drug user, an IV drug user, and that would prevent both injury to your own body, but also the transmission of something like hepatitis C or AIDS. So really thinking about containing a problem, not merely fighting it, per se. So the slides here too are thanks to an artist, Ed Bruchet. So I'm using an artist to kind of give you a lens to look at this as well. Who is attracted to the field of drug policy? My notion is that it's multifaceted problem solvers. So folks like Mark Kleiman, who's a UCLA professor who basically implemented the laws in Washington. He himself is a triple major, political science, econ, and philosophy. Bill Martin is a classic example of a drug policy interest where he's equal parts drug policy, religion, and criminology. Myself, I'm interested in drug policy, art, and medicine. And I really often see the collision of both sides of my brain. So I encourage you guys to do that left brain, right brain tango as we move forward. But let's cut to the chase. Which states are actually doing a good job? There are plenty of states out there who are trying, but who's actually doing it in the best possible way? And my definition of best possible, I should say, is the one who's doing it with the best harm reduction. So use that as your lens. Arizona is kind of cool because they have reciprocity. meaning if you think about the driver's license concept, and please, folks, as we move forward, don't be intimidated by the amount of text. When you get started reading policy, you realize it's a very, very long reading experience. So I will summarize, but I haven't omitted anything. Always the reference will be on there for anybody who wants to go deeper. But the interesting thing that Arizona has done is to respect your licensing in other states. So I can come here from New Mexico and rent a car in Houston and have my driver's license honored. Similarly here, a visiting qualifying patient can take their written certification about their diagnosis and basically be licensed in the state of Arizona immediately. As with all things, there's a catch. The catch is really, if you look at the very bottom of the law here, a qualifying patient is not authorized to obtain marijuana from a nonprofit medical marijuana dispensary. So while you can possess it, you can't purchase it. Very paradoxical. On to Washington, and this is really around the US in 80 seconds, we'll say. Again, Washington's doing something interesting because, from a public health standpoint, because they're defining the pesticides, they're defining the herbicides, they're defining the insecticides. They've in fact created a database of 200 that are registered, and those are the only allowed pesticides. If you're using something different, you can be in violation of Washington pesticide laws. Because so many folks are already immunocompromised, you really don't want to be breathing in a pesticide. It makes no sense. So I think protecting folks from inhaled chemicals and residual solvents, it's a super no-brainer. The original 13 colonies, as I call them, the first 13 states to have medical cannabis laws, the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, published an article in August 2014, this is brand new, where they basically found that from 1999 to 2010, a critical period of the young medical cannabis laws, opiate overdose. So literally people taking too many opiates and then dying from overdose. And what they found too, these deaths are from legitimate prescriptions. These are not illegal folks. These are people who have had this prescribed by a doctor. So this study occurred at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine, and it was remarkable. These states had 28.4% fewer people die from opiate overdose. It's remarkable that drugs like OxyContin, Percocet, and Vicodin can kill people, but we're still prescribing them when medical cannabis could be an option. So this is really, really classic harm reduction. It just has a study to back it up. So that reference is at the top. 15 out of 23 states have personal cultivation for the medical cannabis folks. This is interesting for elderly and dying people, and there's a study, I'll start with the reference at the bottom here. There's a study that says 2 researchers went to a nursing home. They gave these nursing home patients a plant to take care of. The oppositional group was just told that the nursing home was taking care of everything and not to worry. But the folks who had the personal responsibility, who actually had their plants and cared for a living thing, had these really amazing reactions. Among them are a feeling of personal freedom, self-determination, things that we hear in Texas a lot. Really feeling that you're not only more active, but happier, and improvements in symptoms. Some folks could even reduce their medications. The other interesting thing too is when recreational states are gonna let folks grow plants. I've seen that be very controversial, but in Washington, D.C., we will get to see it take place, hopefully on television so we all can watch. Any person, thanks to Initiative 71, any person 21 or older can produce 6 cannabis plants, with 3 or fewer being mature plants. That's pretty amazing. But from the standpoint of the other reference, I really think growing a plant is ultimately therapeutic, maybe for all of us. Canadians, gotta love these folks. They even wrote into their law, what if somebody's a homeless applicant? Can they still get medical cannabis? The answer in Canada, for sure. You just cannot beat this level of compassion. All they have to do, the patient, has to attest to the residents, have a manager sign off, stating that the manager is providing food, lodging, other social services, and it's pretty remarkable just to imagine the kind of care and compassion that we could have for one another, and perhaps meeting one another in bad circumstances instead of waiting for folks to meet some standard. You know, we have in the US government housing, and many people will lose their housing for medical cannabis reasons. And I feel the Canadians have really riffed on that idea and kind of thrown it back at us. So, another favorite state of everybody, Colorado. Amendment 64, now Article 28, Section 16 of their actual constitution, Colorado's constitution. I feel like we're all afraid to turn into Colorado. No one really wants it, but I do want to tell you the two things I like about Colorado. Mostly their law is wild, wild west, but here are the cool things. The Colorado Department of Health has created a program, an actual grant, you can see it at the bottom here, that is a program funding research regarding the efficacy of marijuana and its component parts as a medical treatment. So this is huge. This is the very first state to actually put money up from these licenses into research. The way I see this as a comment back to the national government that we really need research, and states can do it if the government's or the federal government's not prepared to do so. The other thing is about driving fatalities. This has come up in Colorado, and there's a lot of misinformation/information. So here it is straight from the Colorado Department of Transportation. This is a little graph put together, the reference is right down there, where you can see the traffic fatalities. You can compare the year 2013, which is our little orange line, to the year 2014 when medical cannabis became legal, January 1st of 2014. And in fact, this green line pretty much echoes 2013, if not a little bit lower in May, June, and July. So actually these traffic fatalities seem to have gone down or stayed relatively consistent. There's the highs and the lows, sort of the records that bracket the two there. Here's another view. Really 2013 and 2014 are almost identical. And in fact, there's a slight improvement. So please don't let the highway fatalities scare you away from having a true opinion about medical cannabis. The thing that we're doing really right in the USA with our DEA is with alcohol. We've kind of got that under control, or dare I even say control? That's really not a harm reduction word. But we at least have a lot of ideas. The essence here is that anything alcoholic is regulated by the Federal Controlled Substances Act. And I think all of us will agree that keeping things 1,000 feet away from elementary schools and playgrounds is a pretty good idea. I don't need to see medical cannabis at my public swimming pool. I'm sure none of you guys do either. But there's always positions for improvement. So I feel like within policy, there's always room to improve. So I'll just take you through a couple sort of non-therapeutic laws, as I call them. New Jersey is doing something really weird, where they don't want more than 3 strains grown. That's bizarre. I compare it to the Galapagos with 3 species. You just wouldn't have wanted Darwin to even go out there. It wouldn't be interesting. So, limiting the number of strains and furthermore limiting the cannabinoid profile is something New Jersey does. Not exceeding 10% is an arbitrary number. And I really feel like without evidence-based policy, we will end up with New Jersey-based policy. New York has done another weird thing where they've emphasized concentrates. Concentrates are ultimately have more addiction potential, meaning you'll build up a resistance to it and keep needing more, so an escalating dose, much like opiates. So for New York to really want to control the form is it's nonsensical. When you could have a lower dose, why wouldn't you want to attack a problem with the lowest dose possible? Adult use is the last real point I want to make. The definition of legal adult use, as defined in Alaska, Washington, Colorado, and now Washington, D.C., is age 21. This makes really no sense in that not a single state in the U.S. has proposed a recreational age that matches the age of actual human brain maturation. So the brain's not done developing until 25, which makes just using alcohols age 21 kind of a foolish, arbitrary choice. So I would really encourage this group, and for Texas to perhaps be the very first state with age 25 circumstances. Or short of medical circumstances, recreation must be age 25. Carbon footprint is something we have to discuss, but I will save that for another day. In closing, I will leave you with two creeds. First, do no harm. Second, leave no trace. So please make a successful medical cannabis policy will minimize the impact on nature and human health. And if everybody can imagine this minimal impact, I would appreciate it. So thank you for your time. I've really enjoyed it. And I look forward to the conversation extending.
Thank you, Leslie. 2 years ago, CNN's Dr. Sanjay Gupta spoke against medical marijuana. And then he studied it more deeply and changed his mind. And in March, in a widely viewed special on CNN, he explained why he had changed his mind and spoke on the mounting evidence that some strains and formulations of cannabis can produce remarkable improvement in children with Dravet syndrome, a severe form of epilepsy. Terri Carriker is the mother of a child with epilepsy, not Dravet, but a serious form, and a co-founder of Embrace Moms, a Christian support group for women whose children have a broad range of disabilities. I've asked Terri to tell us why she believes legal access to medical cannabis would help her child and her family and other children and other families. They will probably do that.
There it is.
I don't know.
They did it.
You probably should change it.
No, they did it. Thank you. I'm so grateful to be here tonight to have the opportunity to share Katharine's story. I hope that as you listen, you will understand why so many parents are pushing so hard for legalization for medical marijuana. Coincidentally, November is Epilepsy Awareness Month, so I get a twofer here, get to do my part for epilepsy awareness. According to CURE, Citizens United for Research in Epilepsy, 1 in 26 patients or people will develop epilepsy over their lifetime. Lucky for me, the population of Texas is 26.4, so I think I can say that approximately 1 million Texans suffer from or will suffer from epilepsy. About a third of these individuals will develop treatment-resistant epilepsy, which means that in spite of all the pharmaceuticals, devices, diets, surgeries, everything that traditional medicine has to offer, some 350,000 individuals or more who suffer from epilepsy in our great state will not gain control over their seizures. This uncontrolled third is where my Katharine lives. Because she falls in this group, she has an increased mortality rate. She is 40% more likely to die of SUDEP, sudden unexplained death in epilepsy, than her counterparts who have control over their seizures. This group is also more likely to have physical and intellectual disabilities, as Katharine does now. And they're also more likely to suffer numerous other comorbid conditions. Until her first seizure, Katharine was developing typically. She had a very traumatic onset, and that landed us in the ICU, 3 days in the ICU, battery of tests, about $100,000 later, and the doctors were scratching their head. They had no idea what happened. We went home with a diagnosis of a febrile seizure. We thought we were done, just a fluke. About a month later, the scene repeated itself, and we were catapulted into a world we never knew existed. Like a grass fire, over the next 4 months, Katharine's seizures increased exponentially, and by the end of about 4 months, she had already failed 4 medications, and she was having seizures, multiple seizures, pretty much every day. She regressed, losing language. As I said, she developed typically until she was 3.5. She lost motor function. She developed a tremor. For almost a year, she spoke only a handful of words. She was very heavily drugged and pretty much sat in front of her little TV watching videos all day. She didn't laugh, she didn't play, she didn't smile. Over the last 9 years now, we've had countless ER trips. We've had more than 20 hospitalizations. Outside Katharine's regular neurologist, she has seen 8 specialists. She's had a vagus nerve stimulator implanted. We've tried the ketogenic diet, which is very nasty, rigid, controlled diet, twice. She's had 2 brain surgeries to remove the connective tissue between the hemispheres, of her brain, and a resective surgery to remove abnormal brain tissue. Despite all this, Katharine continues to have seizures. To date, she's been on 20 different medications individually and in innumerable combinations. Basically, that's every seizure drug on the market. There are no seizure drugs on the market that Katharine has not taken, and we've tried, several other drugs as well as that. She has about 10 seizures every night still, and she takes a cocktail of about 6 drugs now every day, and her drug levels are so high that the last time we were in the hospital, the nurse or the pharmacy sent the nurse back in to check her dosing to make sure that we hadn't made a mistake. So we have exhausted the whole of what traditional medicine can offer her. At 12.5, Katharine still sleeps in bed with my husband and me for safety reasons. Because of her seizures, she can no longer dress herself, she can no longer brush her own teeth. She's still in diapers. She has mobility issues. She's lost function on her left side because of one of the brain surgeries. She has communication, very simple communication. She asks for what she needs or wants in 1- and 2-word sentences. Water, please. Cannabis, please. Just kidding. She doesn't know what cannabis is yet. She is a shadow of her former self. She doesn't ask her sister for tea parties. She doesn't sing songs. She doesn't tell us stories. She doesn't dream of what she might want to be when she grows up. I vividly remember those first reports of little Charlotte Figi coming out of Colorado. I watched every link that everybody sent me, every video that came along, and I sobbed every time. Seeing Charlotte go from 300 seizures a day to 3 or 4 a week made us think that maybe there really was something out there that could help Katharine. When Sanjay Gupta followed, revealing evidence for support, I could hardly contain my excitement, but then the reality set in. It's not legal. Federal laws get in the way of research. Our hands were tied. It was like it's standing there, it's right there in our grasp, right across the border, and we can't touch it. And Katharine continues to pay the price. Doctors often ask, why the big push? Why don't you go after other things that are in development? And parents' response to that is always side effects. Admittedly, Katharine's drugs keep her out of the ER, they keep her out of the hospital, but they make her weak and unstable. They make her dizzy. They interfere with her cognitive function. She's been so drugged that she couldn't crawl across the room or hold her head up. She's been aggressive, so aggressive they had to separate her from other kids. She's had, risk of vision screening. One time her liver started to fail. We had to take her off of a drug. At 5 years old, she had the pre-liver failure from her seizure drugs. Early reports are showing amazing results in these hardest to treat kids with epilepsy, far and above any pharmaceutical results that we see. Sanjay Gupta said one time, "I have seen more patients like Charlotte firsthand and spent time with them come to realize that it is irresponsible not to provide the best care that we can in the medical community, care that could involve marijuana. I would say that to disallow it is is to fail these vulnerable individuals far more than the medical community even has. It is, in my opinion, tantamount to medical neglect. A lot of families are pressing for CBD only. We need whole plant so that doctors and patients have the right together to titrate and figure out what works for each individual. I cannot, as a mom, advocate for something that would help my daughter but leave Amy's son in the dust. I can't say yay for us, sucks for you, sorry. I see the videos now of little Charlotte and the incredible progress that she's making, and I cry again because I'm so happy for her family. I'm so happy for Charlotte, but I grieve for Katharine because I wonder if we had had access when she was 3 years old over the last 9 years, what kind of recovery could she have made from that? Texas is beyond ready for medical marijuana. I don't know why we're still having this discussion. I really appreciate you being here and listening. I appreciate that you respect us moms and families and individuals in need, and that you will take us in. I hope that you will take us in as you expand your perspective. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. I learned about Dr. Neeraj Shah when I heard him testify, and this was before I realized he'd been a student in my introductory sociology class years before.
He was pretty good.
We realized, I'll tell you a little story. We were talking, and I was calling him Dr. Shah, and he was writing, thinking I was in a system.
I thought you were one of the fellows here.
Yeah, well, I was. Anyway, I am. But anyway, when he said, "Did you teach sociology?" I said, "Oh, Dr. Martin." I said, "It's all right, Dr. Shaw. You can call me Bill." But anyway, I learned about him when I heard him testify in 2013 before a Texas House committee on a bill pertaining to medical marijuana. And like Dr. Sanjay Gupta, Dr. Shah had once dismissed the idea that marijuana could have a serious therapeutic value. After all, major government scientific and regulatory bodies had told him that marijuana has no medical value and was classified among the most dangerous of drugs. But when he looked into it more carefully, he changed his mind. And when he changed his mind, he began to speak out. And now he is a valued voice of reform. So please welcome Dr. Neeraj Shah.
Thanks, Dr. Martin. And I want to say thanks to Rice, my alma mater, and also the Baker Institute for inviting me and agreeing to invite me after a night shift at a hospital here in town. So instead of complaining about my shift, I thought I'd open up with a patient story. This patient was the patient that actually kept me up most of the night last night. And so she's a 30-year-old female. She was admitted to our hospital for her 4th back surgery. So she has what they call failed back syndrome. And her medication list is fairly long with high doses of opiates, benzos, and other psychoactive agents. And I was a little suspicious just reading the history when she came in, and I knew it was going to be a little bit of a problem. But, basically throughout the night, every 2 hours on the dot, despite having a continuous morphine infusion for her pain and being able to push a button to receive additional doses, as she was falling asleep, she would ask for additional doses from the nurse. So the nurse would wake me up to write for more. And so this went on about every 2 hours. And we exceeded, I pretty much got her to where she almost stopped breathing. And when that happens in the hospital, you have to give a medication to reverse all the opiates that you just gave this patient, or else you have to put them on a breathing machine. So it's a potentially lethal situation. And so this was pretty hairy, and this is not an uncommon situation. If you talk to any doctors that work in ERs, in hospitals, and in ICUs, this is happening, all over the country. So, the focus of my talk, I wanted to just quickly review the basic science of the endocannabinoid system and talk mostly about chronic pain and the opiate epidemic abuse. So I'll start with the endocannabinoid system. And the endocannabinoid system, it's a long word, but the distinction is that there are two types of cannabinoids. There are those that come from the plants, and those are called phytocannabinoids, or the plant cannabinoids. But then there's actually cannabis that's made within the body. So there's actually chemicals like anandamide and 2-AG that are synthesized by cells in the body that bind the same receptors that the plant that we call cannabis or marijuana binds. So they act on the same receptors. So it's an endogenous system, and these receptors, the science has been elucidated. There are G-protein coupled receptors, and there are two main receptors that are distributed throughout the body. They're called CB1 and CB2. And they're present in the brain, the spinal cord, peripheral nerves, immune cells, and most of the organ systems. So it's a widely distributed system. Downstream, so basically the body's own cannabis or endocannabinoids bind the CB1 and CB2 receptors, and the downstream effects of binding these receptors are responsible for the therapeutic effects of marijuana, such as pain relief, aversive memory extinction, anti-inflammatory properties, and also the adverse side effects come from those receptors being activated, and those include intoxication, sedation, tachycardia, and there's another slide on that. The mechanism of action has actually been elucidated at the receptors. So there is science about, for example, the CB1 receptor. The way that works is without getting into a science lecture, is presynaptic inhibition. So it basically decreases the signal coming from the presynaptic neuron to the postsynaptic neuron. Then let me figure out how to flip slides here. There we go. So that's kind of a basic review of the endocannabinoid system. And then one of the questions that we always start with when we're dealing with drugs that are potentially dangerous or therapeutic interventions that are potentially dangerous is safety. So safety is always the first concern. There are no medications that are completely safe, and I have a few slides on that coming up. But there are very few things in the world that are totally safe. But compared to other psychoactive medications and other pharmaceuticals, marijuana is considered very safe. There have been no known deaths related directly to cannabis. The lethal dose of marijuana can't be calculated in humans, but based on the animal studies, it's greater than 2,000 pounds. So the only way to kill someone is to literally drop it on their head from a helicopter. And there are a couple of studies that were done at UCLA, and the summary of these studies, I've cited them at the end of the talk, but one question that we always ask is, like cigarettes, does smoking marijuana chronically or heavily, does it lead to emphysema, COPD, and damage to the lungs and decrease in lung function? So Dr. Tashkin at UCLA took a look at this, and his study was, in the population that he studied, did not show any progression to COPD, and it did not show, and this was done over decades and decades in following cannabis smokers, there was no decrease in spirometry or lung function at the end of the study. So in that respect, it's considered safe. And there are trials that are both positive and negative for different types of cancer. So you have to do a pretty thorough review. But if you look at the higher quality trials, there's also one by Dr. Mia Hashibe that took a look at patients with lung and head and neck cancer and their exposures to tobacco and cannabis, and then they also had a control group, non-smokers. And of course, the risk for lung and head and neck cancer was extremely high in the group that smoked tobacco, or if you smoked both, it was considered synergistic, and you had a very high risk for lung cancer. Of course, the placebo group was one. And in the group that smoked marijuana only, the relative risk for developing head and neck and lung cancer was actually 0.84. It was lower than that for non-smokers. So from that study, Dr. Tashkin, concluded in his discussion that, is this potentially actually preventing head and neck cancer, or are there anti-neoplastic effects to cannabis? And the prelim answer, looking at animal studies, is that it is anti-neoplastic. It shrinks tumors in lab rats, but we don't have the high quality studies that we need to conclusively say that in humans. So, of course, that study itself would probably need to be replicated, and we need other high quality studies, to take a look at what the downstream effects are. And two other quick points. There's no respiratory suppression with cannabis or cannabinoids, and that's an important case because with opiates and benzodiazepines, they can actually make you stop breathing, and you can end up on a ventilator or dead. Overdose and withdrawal is relatively mild compared to other psychoactives. And in terms of side effects, if you kind of list the side effects for marijuana side by side with Benadryl, they line up pretty closely. So, it causes, in high doses of either Benadryl or cannabis, you're going to experience intoxication, anxiety, sedation, red eye, fast heart rate, dry mouth, urinary retention, low blood pressure. And I put a question mark by a lower seizure threshold because there's some studies that are both positive and negative for that. And of course, more research needs to be done, especially in light of the story that the mom just shared with us and Dr. Sanjay Gupta's special. The exception is that there are actually deaths from Benadryl, which you can get over the counter. I believe somewhere around 50 deaths a year. It's not high, but Benadryl is potentially lethal yet over the counter. So how many of you have ever taken Tylenol, aspirin, or Advil? Okay, so that's most of the room. How many of you believe these are safe, like fairly safe? They're over the counter, CVS, Walgreens. Okay, so I just want to share a couple of quick facts with you. So acetaminophen toxicity has surpassed viral hepatitis as the most common cause of liver failure. So the number one cause of liver failure in the United States right now would be the red box. It's also the second most common cause of liver failure requiring transplantation. And despite warnings from the FDA in January 2014, they stated that combination pain relievers that contain more than 325 milligrams of acetaminophen should no longer be prescribed. The dose of this Tylenol is 500 milligrams per tablet. So again, we have things that are potentially lethal and that the FDA is recommending that we not use, yet they're readily available over the counter. Most physicians, if you come in, we only have a few tricks in our bag for pain. You have over-the-counter medications. By the time you see us, your pain is more severe. And one of the other things that patients are very comfortable with is taking a lot of Advil. So most physicians acknowledge Advil is in a class of medications called NSAIDs, or non-steroidals. And so most physicians acknowledge that NSAIDs are an important cause of gastrointestinal morbidity. They cause gastritis, inflammation in the duodenum, ulcers, which ultimately can end up bleeding, and deadly, what they call upper GI bleeds, or the UGIB. And this was responsible for somewhere between 3,000 and 16,000 deaths, depending on which study and which year you looked at. The opiate abuse epidemic is spiraling out of control, and that's why I told that story in the beginning. Prescription drug overdose, and this is a quote from the CDC director, Thomas Frieden, that the prescription drug overdose is epidemic in the United States. All too often, in far too many communities, the treatment is becoming the problem. And any of you watch Anthony Bourdain, by chance? He also had an interesting television show where he went back to his hometown, and it had unfortunately succumbed to initially a prescription painkiller epidemic, and then that, he kind of marches it out to where it leads to heroin abuse. And he sits down with the family physician and has dinner, and the whole thing is televised. It's a pretty interesting documentary of that town. But in 2012, healthcare providers wrote 259 million prescriptions for painkillers. So that's enough painkillers or opiates to have every adult have a bottle full of pills. And that's where you start. So that's where this whole slippery slope starts. That's just enough pills for every American citizen to begin their slippery slope down the path of addiction and painkillers. So the DEA recognizes this is a major problem. And recently, October 6, 2014, hydrocodone and all hydrocodone combination products were moved to a higher, more restrictive schedule, to the Schedule 2. And this is directly in response to this epidemic. Give you an idea, so drug overdoses have now, so one way to do it would be to quiz it. What kills more people, car wrecks or drug overdoses? Drug overdoses. So for year after year now, drug overdoses are responsible for more deaths than car accidents. And of those drug overdoses, roughly 40 to 50% of them are from opiates. So half the damage is from prescription pain medicine. So opiate overdoses are on the rise. They've more than tripled since 1990. And like I mentioned, they kill more people than car wrecks. And this is a study that Leslie had brought up about the decrease in deaths from opiate overdose in states that have legalized cannabis. And that's just a graph year to year for the reduction in opioid deaths. Oops. Should I point it at? Sorry, AV issue. Bill. Just the next slide. Excellent. And then just quickly, I wanted to share with you the results. So to prepare for this talk, I looked at a review article on this topic, and it was called Cannabinergic Pain Medicine by Dr. Sunil Agarwal, and he's a NIH clinical fellow and a researcher, and he basically published a review article in the journal, in a pain journal recently. And what he did was he looked at the 38 published randomized controlled trials that met, survey criteria. And of the 38 randomized controlled trials and research trials that he looked at that dealt with pain and opiates, and pain relief with cannabinoids, 71% were positive for pain reduction, and only 29% did not show a benefit. So the majority of the trials that are already in the literature, roughly 70%, show that pain is significantly reduced with cannabis use. And given its reasonable safety profile, I think this is definitely one other tool in our bag to treat chronic pain patients and patients with multiple other diseases that cannabis has, some evidence base to now. I gave this talk probably a few years ago, and there's been so much more research that comes out year after year. So, kind of as the laws progress, the science is also progressing. So I think if the state is going to make a decision, I really do hope that they base it on the science. As far as it comes down to medical marijuana, there are probably thousands and thousands of patients that would benefit from this program. I don't think anyone's asking for a free-for-all. And I think a reasonable thing for both patients and doctors would be to have a limited scope program for at least the conditions that already have evidence that cannabis helps either a particular symptom or a particular disease condition. And one thing that I noticed in the other states is that when you apply to a medical cannabis registry in Arizona, no one is checking the chart. There's actually no review of your medical records at the state level, so there's really no auditing. And so I can think of many more regulated, kind of strict control models that probably would be a better fit for our state. And I hope, people are open-minded enough to consider it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shah. Excellent. Like Terri Carriker, AmyLou Fawell's commitment to making therapeutic cannabis legally available arises from what I think is fair to call a desperate need to respond to issues related to her son's autism. She and her good friend Thalia Michelle, a fellow church member and an active conservative Republican, co-founded Mothers Advocating Medical Marijuana for Autism, MAMA. What a great acronym. I've been privileged to spend time with AmyLou and Thalia to hear their stories and to learn from them about their conviction that cannabis can change their sons and their families' lives, and to be inspired by their indomitable determination to make that possible. Welcome, AmyLou Fawell. Thank you.
I'm going to cry, just telling you right now. As an advocate for medical marijuana, I have met and talked to patients and caregivers across the state of Texas. I'd like to tell you a story about a Texas mother and her son Max, not his real name. Max's mom became a felon the moment she transported cannabis across state lines. She continues her criminal activity by giving it twice daily to her 19-year-old severely autistic son. Max is self-injurious, aggressive towards others, and suffers from grand mal seizures. At age 9, he started banging his head with his arm against tabletops and through walls. It got worse. In one incident, a few years ago, he got so angry in a parking lot that he banged his head against their car windshield until it shattered. At age 17, Max started having grand mal seizures. Mom tried many drugs to stop them. Certain drugs did work, but the main side effect was aggression. Max missed most of his senior year because of his severe behaviors, and his mother spent most of his senior year locked in her bedroom to protect herself from her son. As his primary caretaker, she was also his main victim. She has had handfuls of her hair pulled out, been gouged by his fingernails, bitten until bleeding, deep wounds that took weeks to heal. She has scars the size of Max's open mouth along her jawline on both sides. The final drug they tried this past summer is called Vimpat. While on Vimpat, the violence escalated to beyond the pale. One evening, Max pushed his mother to the ground and jumped on her repeatedly. She thought she was going to die. She couldn't call the police for help because she was afraid they would take him away from her, because despite everything, she wanted to take care of her son. After these episodes, she would literally have to hold Max and reassure him that he was loved and forgiven so that he wouldn't try to kill himself with more headbanging. He was filled with remorse and self-hate for who he was and what he did to his mother. Desperate, She tried medical marijuana in the form of transdermal patches derived from whole plant cannabis. It has been nothing short of a miracle. She started using them on a typical morning. Max was angry and pacing, so she applied a THC patch and quickly went to lock herself in her room. After 30 minutes, she didn't hear anything, so she went to check on him. He was in his room, sitting on his bed, calm and smiling. Since that day, over 2 months ago, he has not had one aggression. The headbanging has also stopped. The anxiety and OCD that fueled these outbursts is almost gone. To control his seizures, she added a CBD patch, and she continues to tweak the ratios, and right now they're about 1-to-1. CBD-only patches did not help with behaviors, and THC-only patches did not control seizures. As a result of medical marijuana, Max and his mother are able to leave the house to take walks, go to church, and run errands. The quality of their life is greatly improved. She now admits that before medical marijuana, she couldn't really handle Max, but with it, she can take care of her son. Max is nonverbal, but he can communicate by independently typing on a keyboard, and here's what he has to say. Been so pleased with my new marijuana patches. Got new life now. Already thinking about the future. I feel really good. God is watching out for me. Surely in Max's case, breaking the law is necessary to prevent a harm worse than the one the law is aimed at preventing. Legally speaking, it's what you call a necessity defense. What's criminal is to withhold this God-given plant from children who are sick, suffering, and dying. Max is not alone. 1.2 million children have autism in the United States, and 53% of these children exhibit violent behaviors. It's epidemic. We don't know what causes it, we don't know how to fix it, and we don't know how to keep it from happening to the next child. Since 1970, autism rates have risen over 14,000%. If you haven't been personally affected by autism, you will be. It used to be 1 in 10,000, and now it's 1 in 68 children, or 1 in 47 boys. And that doesn't even count kids that are under 4, because these CDC statistics are from 2010. However, despite the fact that 23 states have medical marijuana laws, not one of them has autism as a qualifying condition. The question is why not cannabis for autism? And sadly, the answer is because we don't have the research. I say it's time for the research to be done for 2 reasons. We have overwhelming anecdotal proof of children making global improvements on cannabis. That's what epilepsy started with, anecdotal reports. And secondly, science is on our side. Anecdotally, Mama gets reports from around the country of children with better socialization, improved language skills, cognitive gains, reduced anxiety, which leads to improved behaviors, and reduced seizure activities for the 1/3 of children with autism who also suffer from seizures. Science is on our side because autism is medical and cannabis is medicine. Underlying issues of autism include inflammation, oxidative stress, autoimmunity, and a myriad of GI disorders. Cannabis is an anti-inflammatory, an antioxidant. It regulates the immune system, and qualifying conditions in many legal states allow for various GI diseases such as Crohn's, colitis, nausea, and wasting disease. What other medicine is out there that has the potential to safely treat behavioral symptoms and address the underlying issues of autism as well? Instead, to control behaviors, autistic children are commonly put on antipsychotics, such as Risperdal, Abilify, and Seroquel at early ages and kept on them for years. Does this TV commercial for Abilify sound familiar? Call your doctor if your depression worsens or you have unusual changes in behavior or thoughts of suicide, or if you have uncontrollable muscle movements, as these could become permanent. High blood sugar has been reported with Abilify, and medicines like it in extreme cases can lead to coma or death. Other risks include increased cholesterol, weight gain, decreases in white blood cells, which can be serious, dizziness on standing, seizures, trouble swallowing, and impaired judgment or motor skills. and they won't give kids cannabis. My husband and I did everything we were supposed to for my son. Told you. Early diagnosis, that's what they tell you to do, get early diagnosis, intense behavioral, dietary, and biomedical interventions for his entire life. But my Jack is pretty much the same kid he was at age 2, except now at age 15, his teachers are afraid of him. Well, I'm not saying that medical marijuana will help every child with autism, or even my son. I wonder where Jack would be today if 10 years ago we could have tried it. I wonder where he will be in 10 more years if we can't.
Thank you, Amy. Now I want to introduce to you Dr. Katharine Neill, the Alfred C. Glassell III Postdoctoral Fellow in Drug Policy here at the Baker Institute. Katie arrived at the Institute in July and has already distinguished herself as a learned, well-organized, productive scholar committed to insightful analysis and willing to and able to apply that to public policy. In addition, she's a terrific colleague. She's currently coordinating the production of a booklet that we intend to distribute to the Texas Legislature on what the experiences of other states tell us about what happened and what to expect when cannabis laws were changed. So stay tuned for that. Please welcome Katie Neill.
Thank you for the introduction, Bill, and thank you all for being here this evening. I'm going to be talking to you guys a little bit about how other states have been able to get medical marijuana legalized and what some effective tactics may be for Texans to try to get their legislature to legalize medical marijuana. So as some of the other speakers mentioned, there's now 23 states, as well as the District of Columbia, that have legalized medical marijuana. I believe that it's only a matter of time before all 50 states do legalize. However, we would like to see this process pick up the pace a little bit, and so we're trying to look at ways to do that. If you look at some of the other states so far that have legalized medical marijuana, a lot of them are traditionally liberal or libertarian states. So you think of places like Colorado, California, Massachusetts, Maine, and places like that. The current climate right now is very good for medical marijuana. There's a lot of momentum behind the issue. Part of this has to do with evolving views among the public and growing acceptance that marijuana really can be good medicine. And some of this is coming from the increasing data on medical benefits. We're seeing more and more studies come out every day. Some of the ones are mentioned by previous speakers that attest to the ways that medical marijuana can be helpful and can help with ailments in ways that other things like opioids can't do. Another kind of side issue to this is that people are really getting tired of the war on drugs. One side effect of the war on drugs is that we've collected lots and lots of data on it, and we've been able to see a lot of evidence that shows that the war on drugs has created a lot of violence, and it's been ineffective at reducing supply or demand, not only of marijuana, but of other drugs as well. And so right now, I think that a lot of the public is getting kind of tired of this, fighting this war, spending a lot of money on it. And that tiredness carries over to support for things like marijuana and medical marijuana as well as a sort of first step towards further legalization. One thing that we can do in Texas is that we can learn from what other states have done. So Florida right now is a good example to look at. Just last week, they had an initiative on their ballot, a medical marijuana amendment. It got 58% of the vote, which is a majority, but it wasn't enough to pass. Because it was an amendment, it needed 60% of the vote, which is a really tall order. There are only 5 other states with medical marijuana that had more than 60% of the vote for it to pass. But the medical marijuana groups they're not going to give up. They plan to put something on the ballot in 2016. They're hopeful that they will be successful then because there'll be greater turnout, especially among the young who, overwhelmingly support medical marijuana as well as recreational. Some of the lessons to take away from that, one is that these kinds of initiatives really need bipartisan support. Part of the failure of the amendment in Florida is being blamed on partisanship. The amendment was backed by a Democrat, and the major opponents were Republican, and it really got caught up in the struggle between the two parties for who would run the governor and would be in the governor's office in that state. So the lesson from that is that really, whatever your ideological preference is, if you're trying to support medical marijuana, you really have to get a tie-in from both sides of the ideological aisle. And beyond that, it doesn't need to be a partisan issue. And turning it into one can really matter. We've seen that at the ballot, and also matters in the state legislature. Money is also very important. In the Florida case, the Morgan & Morgan law firm spent $5 million supporting the Florida amendment. That's a lot of money. But there was the Drug Free Florida group that they spent a lot of money too. They got $5.5 million from one donor, Sheldon Adelson. For those of you who don't know, Sheldon Adelson is he's a big Republican donor. He's a billionaire businessman, made a lot of money from casinos. And that money really did make a difference. In July, there was a poll done that said that 88% of Floridians approved of medical marijuana. Then came a lot of ads, opposition ads that came from sheriff groups, Republican leaders, business groups that said that the amendment was too broad, that it would give access to medical marijuana to people who didn't really need it. And so that the struggle in Florida really shows you how much the money matters. So it's good to have a well-funded campaign for medical marijuana. And of course, it's also good if your opponents don't have that much money to fight you with. So what can we do here in Texas? The public support is here. In February, a poll found that 77% of Texans support medical marijuana. So from the public standpoint, the support is there, and there's, in that sense, Texas is ready for the medical marijuana. There are challenges, though. One big challenge is that Texas doesn't have a voter initiative process, as many of the states that have passed medical marijuana bills do. Right now, the Republicans are still in control, and they probably will be for some time. This is not to say, again, that this needs to be a partisan issue, and there are Republicans that support medical marijuana. One problem, though, is that a lot of Republicans have to be concerned about winning their primary races, and the primaries tend to be much more conservative, and so that then puts pressure on these officials to not back things like medical marijuana in order to win those primaries. One thing that you're seeing in a lot of southern states and Republican-controlled states is the passage of cannabidiol laws. It's CBD is the common acronym, and CBD is a chemical that's extracted from the marijuana plant, but usually it has very little THC. And these kinds of laws are very popular with Republicans and other people that don't want to appear soft on crime, because in this way they can say that they're still helping sick children and get access to these drugs, but they're not helping people get high. Of course, the problem with this, one is that there's very strict guidelines, so a lot of people can't get access to these CBD drugs. Another problem is that a lot of research has shown that for many people, the therapy with the whole plant is much better. So the CBD laws are quite limited, but that is the kind of thing that we're seeing being passed, especially in more southern states. So what can we do? One thing is to really focus on groups that are sympathetic, that don't conjure up images, of conservative or liberal. So one prime example is veterans. Everyone loves to support veterans, especially conservatives. We have a lot of veterans here in Texas. Bill Martin's written about how veterans with PTSD can benefit from cannabis. There's been medical research showing that that the cannabis does provide really good benefits for people with PTSD and can help them in a way that the opioids may not be able to, or again, as some of the research that Dr. Shah was pointing out, and with the overdose deaths related to the opiates, cannabis is a much safer alternative to that. Also, focusing on families, and the speakers that we just had. You ladies are great, sharing your stories, and those are the kinds of things that we really need to focus on. These are the messengers that we need for this issue. And beyond doctors and families and veterans, there are conservatives that support medical marijuana, either because they believe that it's the right thing to do, because they think that people should have access to this medicine, or from a fiscal point of view where, they want to stop spending money arresting people for marijuana, which, fiscal conservatism is a primary tenet, right? So that's important. There also are law enforcement groups that support reforming drug laws, and getting these groups together and active is really important, because it's a way to span ideological lines and really get at people who may still be resistant to change. It's also important to build support online, using social media, getting young people. A lot of young people are naturally supportive of these ideas, and encouraging them to go out and vote, encouraging them to join groups that advocate for these things. A lot of the groups here in Texas and in Houston do a really good job of having a media presence and of trying to build support for these issues. And again, continuing this coverage. Not letting the media drop this issue. So having events like this, having things where we can point to new research that's coming out and really put pressure on the media to cover it and bring awareness of the issue. One thing that I think would be really good is if, and this costs a little money, but having some pro-medical marijuana TV ads. This is a great way to bring awareness and education to citizens that, might not on their own actively Google things about medical marijuana, but, if they're sitting at home and they're watching a football game or the nightly news and they see an ad talking about, how the benefits of this medical marijuana have helped someone's child with epilepsy or a veteran with PTSD, that would be a great way to spread awareness to people who just haven't paid much attention to this issue so far. And again, it's also really important to pressure our elected officials. Again, this change in Texas has to happen with the state legislature. So they have to know that citizens care about this and that it's an issue that people will vote on. That's what elected officials care about, is getting reelected. And so if we can show them that, hey, there's a big block of voters that care about this issue of medical marijuana, I think that will be a way to get the change. And finally, we're going to need some patience and some perseverance, because this will happen, it will change, but it's going to take some patience, and we're going to have to continue to keep at it so that we can get the message across. Thank you.
Vincent Lopez is rapidly becoming a legendary figure in the movement to allow those who need it to have legal access to cannabis. As your program notes, Vincent has dealt with muscular dystrophy for most of his life. Cannabis has not cured him, but regular use has made his life better, as he will tell you. Last year, he founded the Patient Alliance for Cannabis Therapeutics to provide a safe place for medical cannabis patients to share their experiences. Vincent is a writer, a publisher, a tireless advocate, and to many, a true hero. He has testified before legislative committees, freely acknowledging the role cannabis plays in his life. I don't think any of the lawmakers on those committees have called for his arrest or demanded that he stop using the drug that helps him deal with a tough situation and lead a productive life. I recommend they extend that generosity to others by writing it into law. Please welcome Vincent Lopez.
You guys have to give me a little moment here, letting the computer start up. But I want to start out by saying thank you to the Baker Institute for having me out tonight. And it is definitely an honor to be here today. Excuse me real quick. Right. Excuse me, got a little technical thing here. Double click on that file. Double click. Okay. Well, once again, thank you guys for having me here tonight. It's been my pleasure to be here. The question comes down to is Texas ready for medical marijuana? As Texans, I believe we've been ready for quite some time. We would have passed years ago, but with no open ballot initiative, we are bound to a different set of legislative processes. But we know who we need to educate, who we need to be talking to, and the conversation that needs to be happening. We know the voice of patients, and we shall be silent no more. It's hard not to turn away from the fact that one day my own physical mobility will cease to exist and that I will not be able to self-medicate. This in turn would fall onto my caregiver, which happens to be my mother. Therefore, she needs to have protection, and I fight to see that she has it. It's never good living in fear, for fear is a sickness that can keep us from facing reality, that can inhibit us from looking beyond ourselves, that can blind us of our own true courage. And stepping out of the cannabis closet, I had always been familiar with the feelings of fear and intimidation, but nothing compared to the weight I was carrying by not coming out, by not saying anything, by living life in secret. No longer could I live in silence knowing I had an answer in cannabis for the painful muscle spasms, the stiffness and contortion I endure, the loss of appetite and sleep. If there's an answer in cannabis, then I shall not stay silent. This is my body, and how I choose to alleviate the pains of my body is solely up to me. When it comes to the rights of medical cannabis patients in the state of Texas, it is imperative that we do not make the previous mistakes made by other states. It is imperative that we secure our right and freedom of choice to medicate as we choose with what we choose. Too many rely on what our own physicians tell us over that of our own minds and perception. But let's remember, there is no better moderator of our bodies than ourselves. We need to stay focused to the sole objective that not only fuels our purpose, but also fuels the trial and truth that we all embody. War is a malignant disease, an idiocy, a prison, and the pain it causes is beyond telling or meaning. In being a patient of Becker muscular dystrophy, a deteriorating muscle disease, I know firsthand about the consumption of disease and disability and the long-term detrimental effects it can have on the mind and on the spirit. It's a battle within itself, contending with a terminal disease, a dragon that will never leave your side, that will always be a part of you. This kind of trial can be a whisper in the ear, reminding you of your difficulty and all that you should fear, that your only purpose in life is to simply wait to die. If you can relate, then you know of the darkness of the dragon that lurks within, and though these dragons may consume our bodies, you also know of the bravery and courage embedded in us to keep fighting back harder than ever before. I simply say that there is no man or no law greater than the eternal confrontation of what we're having to endure. What can any man or law do to me that this affliction hasn't done to me already? And while for some there's a cure, there are others where there is no turning back, where there are no irreversible changes to be had. Let's understand that cannabis is not a cure for my condition, but an alleviator of my own choice. There's not much more I can do to stop the continual progression of this disease. My muscles will continue to deteriorate, my mobility will continue to suffer, and my pain will continue to increase. It's in accepting this fact where I am awakened and inspired to the bigger picture and responsibility that extends beyond my own life and onto future generations to come. When I first got involved, I was only seeking the legality of a medicine that had become significantly beneficial for me in regard to the symptoms of Becker muscular dystrophy. Unaware I was of what more my eyes and heart would see, not just within myself, but within many others. Let it be known that the canons of truth are upon you when a child is suffering with disease and/or disability, in seeing the system that is waiting for them, in seeing the amount of distress the bureaucratic process can bring onto an already difficult, painful, and desperate situation. The canons of truth are upon you when families are jumping onto the Texas exodus to Colorado, having no other alternative due to the illegality of medical cannabis here in Texas. The canons of truth are upon you when a child is incapable of even having a voice or the ability of full-on expression. The canons of truth are upon you when the medicinal properties of cannabis can bring a child out of that darkness, out of that epileptic catatonic state. There is no greater inspiration than looking into the eyes of a child. It invokes an irreplaceable feeling that truly reminds us all of the sacrifice we must all make for them. I gladly give my life 4 times over to be the voice for them. No real legalization can exist unless it protects the rights of all. Therefore, we need to keep with the knowledge that each word of what we express has its own power, time, and place. We must have an awareness of our own strengths and weaknesses, an understanding of the process of legislation, and we must always seek a higher aim than just momentary satisfaction. Keep in mind that our actions of today greatly affect the outcomes of tomorrow. We cannot ascend beyond the entrapment and binding clutches of isolation, desolation, and fear if we allow the repercussions they inflict on us. It's about facing that dragon eye to eye and conquering the ultimate chess game from within, not about turning away out of fear or denial. It's about becoming something you thought you never could be and taking to heart that which doesn't kill us only makes us stronger. It's how we wield our inner strength that enables us to confront our demons so courageously and without fear. Let me say, if Jesus were here today, he wouldn't sway and neither should we. Go to the ones who've been separated from their families due to this ridiculous drug war. Go to the ones who've been forgotten, neglected, abused, and misunderstood. Go to the ones tormented, lost, and left behind. Go to the ones consciously unaware of their true potential and the knowledge of nature's medicinal truth. How much longer shall we suffer these injustices, the death of our liberties, the wretchedness and consumption of disease? How much longer shall we allow these mighty mountains of desperation to exist and suffer the depravities of our own mental silence? We win this journey by being that book of knowledge, by being that magician, and by being that machine. And really, by simply making ourselves immortal. Thank you.
Terri and AmyLou and Vincent have told us how cannabis helps with the conditions that afflict them and their loved ones and millions of others. These, of course, as Vincent has just alluded, not the only conditions that cannabis has been shown to improve and that Dr. Shah and others have talked about. Well-known others include easing nausea from chemotherapy, relieving eye pressure caused by glaucoma, stimulating the appetite of people with AIDS and anorexia, and lessening chronic pain. Less well known publicly is promising work that's being done with various cancers, Parkinson's disease, and Alzheimer's disease. And since we're one day past Veterans Day, let me call attention to another issue that has drawn my concentrated interest, and that is the ways cannabis can help veterans deal with the PTSDs that they have suffered in war. Let me recommend to you now, if I can see where the, I'll pull down, oh, I got it now, I got it. This is not my home computer. This is the Baker Institute home page here, and you go to it. You can pull down on the Centers and Programs to Drug Policy, and on our opening page here, you see here is the article about War Without End, about PTSD, and one of the great graphics of all time, as far as I am concerned. We also have invite you to browse through our website, and one of the things that I mentioned Katie Neill has done, is to develop the Baker, or to add to, this was developed when she came, but she's recently coordinated the Baker Institute website on what does the future hold for the cannabis industry. And there's several people speaking there, and one of these is, this is really tiny, Dr. Elias Jackson, who is of the cannabis industry critical tasks on the road to legalization. And this is, it's really the reason I mention him in particular, they're all good here. Leslie McAhren has a piece, and so does Katie Neill. But Dr. Jackson is going to be speaking, and Ann, I left this folder there, but tell me the date and where. A week from tonight. At the University of Houston.
And we have flyers, we can just pass them out to everybody.
Okay, we flyers to, okay.
If you have a question about medical marijuana, ask the doctors. And this faculty young lady behind me, Zoe, is the one who put this all together. And she is fabulous. She knows you would have to say what some of us older people have done wrong. Anyway, this is next week from tonight at University of Houston, Graduate School of Social Work. It's all on here.
Okay, fine.
Come and ask these doctors and listen to it. Okay?
Thanks very much. That's
Thank you, Bill, for giving us this chance.
surely. Well, this is Ann Lee, who is one of the founders of the Republicans Against Marijuana Prohibition, and
It's not Republican to support prohibition.
I believe that.
What they said in Florida, us Republicans have got to get this over. It is not Republican. It is not Republican to support big government, all the stuff that comes with prohibition. Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome. Thank you. Now, so far you've heard the scientific and the quite personal reasons why Texas should legalize medical cannabis, and Katie Neill has told us about what the political process is as revealed elsewhere. Now, to inform us about the realities of trying to move change through the Texas Legislature, we are honored to have the Honorable Elliott Naishtat, the state representative of District 49. It's a large swath of Austin just west of I-35, although he's originally from New York City. Very and very pleased with that fact, and why not. As a member of the House since 1990 and re-elected 12 times, Representative Naishtat has been a stalwart advocate for measures that will preserve and improve the health of our citizens. He's worked more than any other member of the House to pass bills furthering the legalization of medical cannabis, and he knows how difficult and discouraging that can be, but he keeps at it, and believing that one day change will come. So in planning this program, it seemed quite important to invite Representative Elliott Naishtat to give us his opinion on just how ready Texas is for medical marijuana. And let me point out that he had a bad bicycle accident a couple of months ago and is still not over it. But he's made a real effort to come tonight and was successful at it, and we really appreciate that effort as well. So please welcome Representative Naishtat to the podium.
Thanks, Bill, and thank you all for being here. A lot more people than at the beginning. So first, I am cautiously optimistic, and that's because of people like Vincent. Last session, we actually had a hearing on the affirmative defense bill, which I'll tell you more about in a little while. And the testimony was so compelling. We had not had a hearing in 6 years because the chairs of the Public Health Committee during that time period would not let me have a hearing on the bill. We had a hearing last session. All of the testimony was absolutely compelling, but Vincent's was the showstopper. And I've shared this with some of you, that after the hearing, 2 members of the committee, the chair of the committee and a doctor who's on the committee, both Republicans, came up to me independently of each other and said, Elliott, I'm so glad we had this hearing. I listened to all the testimony. I had no idea how helpful this can be to people who have illnesses and who can function, can work, can live because of medicinal marijuana. They said, now don't go saying that I'm going to support it next session, but they both said they're going to look very, very carefully at this issue, and we call that in the legislature important incremental change. It's a step forward. So before I talk about that affirmative defense bill, I do want to mention that there are several other, perhaps bolder and more complicated bills that I expect to be filed this coming session, and there have been references made to at least one of these. One of those bills would be similar to the very limited or narrow bill passed by the Florida legislature, which Katie talked about, and that regards intractable epilepsy. The Texas bill, which would be modeled on that, and I know that there are some problems with what was done in Florida, and there were some political concerns, but we're looking at it, and I'm pretty sure a bill will be introduced. The Texas bill would set up dispensaries licensed through the Department of Public Safety, DPS, don't ask me why, to cultivate, process, and dispense low THC cannabis, and set up a registry of physicians who could prescribe medical cannabis to a patient through a compassionate use registry. This legislation is sometimes referred to as a cannabidiol or Dravet syndrome bill. The patients much suffer from intractable epilepsy, and the physicians must either undergo 8 hours of specialized training or be a certified epileptologist. The cannabis must be ingestible and not smokable. So this is a very, very important but limited or narrow bill. But I know we have a couple of legislators who are very interested in pursuing this. And Katie also mentioned that there was a much broader medical marijuana constitutional amendment to allow patients with debilitating medical conditions to use marijuana and to obtain it from regulated dispensaries. And this was also in Florida. So recently we had the bill which did pass the legislature. It has not been signed into law, which is very narrow in scope, the intractable epilepsy bill, which will be introduced in Texas. But there was the broader medical marijuana constitutional amendment, which would have basically legalized marijuana for medicinal purposes. And it's important to know that while it didn't pass, it did need 60% of the vote, 58% of those who voted supported the measure, so that's a good sign. We do not have initiative in Texas, and there are pros and cons about that. All the states that have term limits got the term limits through initiative efforts. So, another medical marijuana bill in Texas would stipulate that seriously ill patients who are properly authorized by a physician may not be arrested or penalized for possessing up to 2.5 ounces of marijuana or for growing a limited amount in a secure location. Debilitating medical conditions are set out in the bill. Registered businesses would be allowed to cultivate and sell medical marijuana to qualified patients. The businesses would be required to keep the marijuana secure, and the drug would have to be tested and labeled for potency. Patients who are seriously ill and can't travel could designate a caregiver to obtain the marijuana from authorized organizations. There's fairly wide support for this bill because it could result in help for a broader range of medical conditions than, say, the intractable epilepsy bill in Florida. There are 2 or 3 legislators who are looking closely at this bill. We don't have a commitment yet. As was mentioned, we also expect to see marijuana decriminalization and legalization bills filed. I think it goes without saying that any decriminalization bill would be more likely to pass. One bill will provide for civil penalties. Possession of an ounce or less could result in a simple fine and no criminal record. There's bipartisan support for this. Many of you know Representative Harold Dutton, and he's worked on decriminalizing marijuana for years. He'll file a bill providing that possession of 1 ounce or less would result in no more than a Class C misdemeanor, punishable by from $0 to $500 with no jail time. Currently, the penalty for possession of up to 2 ounces of marijuana is a Class B misdemeanor, a fine of up to $2,000 and up to 180 days in jail. So think about that. Today, a person with a bona fide medical condition who uses marijuana for strictly medicinal purposes, Vincent, may be penalized up to $2,000 and sentenced to 6 months in jail for doing that. That's ridiculous. I also want to point out that the reason I said a minute ago decriminalization bills are more likely to pass than legalization bills is that legislators, especially in Texas, and I'm not from Texas, they never want to appear to be weak on crime. Voting to legalize an illegal substance would open up that representative or senator to accusations of being weak on crime, a no-no in this state. And over the years, I've had members come up to me and say, Elliott, your bill, the affirmative defense, it only will help people who are genuinely sick. It's great, it's great. But I have a cousin who's a deputy sheriff in Laredo, and I can't support the bill. I can't look weak on crime. So let me mention the medical marijuana affirmative defense bill that I've introduced 6 times and that I sincerely believe would have the best chance of passing this coming session. The bill would create an affirmative defense to prosecution for patients who are being treated by a licensed physician and who use marijuana to ameliorate the effects of a bona fide medical condition. A patient, if arrested, would have to prove in court that he or she was suffering from a bona fide medical condition as defined by his or her physician, and that that physician had discussed or recommended marijuana as an option to alleviate the symptoms of the condition. The doc couldn't prescribe marijuana because it's illegal in Texas, but a doc could recommend or suggest it. The bill provides protections for physicians licensed in Texas who recommend or suggest that certain patients try marijuana for strictly medicinal purposes. So we put in protections for a doc who does that. The bill does not legalize marijuana. It doesn't legalize anything. So that gets at the looking weak on crime issue. It would simply allow a defendant to prove in court that he or she was using marijuana pursuant to a doctor's recommendation to relieve the symptoms, the pain associated with a recognized medical condition. If this is proved, the judge would be authorized to drop the charges, to say, go home. You're in a wheelchair, you have multiple sclerosis, this is helping you live or work. Go home. The judge wouldn't be required to drop the charges, but he could. So there are two hurdles, so to speak. You have to have a licensed doctor who recommends that you use it. And we don't spell out which diseases or conditions would qualify. It's up to the doctor. The doctor would say, yes, I think marijuana could help you. So that's hurdle one. A doctor has to say, yes, I'm going to recommend that you try it. And then if you get arrested, you're in your house and you get arrested. And so then the second hurdle is that you've got to go into court and explain to the judge that you're not a criminal, you have an illness, this helps you, my doctor recommended it, and it would be up to the discretion of the judge. So then the judge could say no more, go home, charges dismissed. But if the judge wasn't so sure, if he thought it was a con artist or something, he wouldn't have to discharge. We talked about the states that have either legalized or authorized the use of marijuana. I don't have to do that again. And we also, Katie talked about the recent poll, 77% of Texans would support legalizing marijuana for medical purposes. So let me wrap up. I believe medical marijuana, therapeutic cannabis bills have a good chance of passage in Texas this coming session. And I see some of you, including my chief of staff, looking at me like I'm insane. But let me explain. There are many members of the legislature, particularly libertarian-leaning members of both parties, who may be more supportive than you think. The key to change, and I know Katie spoke about this also, and we'll hear another speaker talk about this, but in my opinion, the key to change is community organizing and grassroots pressure. You must work through supportive organizations and reach out to legislators back home and in Austin for the purpose of educating and enlightening them about the benefits of and need for medicinal marijuana legislation. Pressure must be brought on members of the House and Senate in their home districts, from constituents, from people they know from church or school or civic associations, from people they respect. This is a big job for all of you. You must work through supportive organizations. You must get other people back home involved. You must identify members of your organizations or people who live in the districts where there are legislators whose votes we would need, and that's many, many of them. So it's a big job for all of you. It's a big job for those of us who work on these issues at the legislature. Let's make it happen.
Please.
Well, some advocates for medical marijuana are more optimistic than others, but nobody believes that the wall of resistance to change is going to fall without significant pressure, as Representative Naishtat has just said. One of the most influential organizations nationally and in Texas is the Drug Policy Alliance, which is a national advocacy leader for drug law reform and has cooperated helpfully with the Baker Institute since the beginning of the drug policy program in 2001, and has been a welcome co-sponsor of our program tonight. Representing DPA tonight is Jeronimo Saldaña, the legislative and organizing coordinator for the movement building team process at the Drug Policy Alliance. A man who does the kind of thing that Representative Naishtat is calling for. There are other organizations involved here, and Jeronimo is going to tell you something about that, but he's going to tell us what's going on outside the halls of legislature, and I suspect we'll offer suggestions as to what those who believe in the value of therapeutic cannabis can do to make it legal in Texas. Jeronimo.
Thank you. Hey. It is amazing to be here in front of all of you. I am the last one, which means you get to go home so soon. But more importantly, you are here because you have a loved one or you yourself can benefit from medical marijuana. And that's huge. So I want to be the first to say congratulations on passing it in 2015 because I'm sure it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Everyone has already said it so amazingly, from Leslie starting off and telling us about the states. I didn't want you to stop. I wanted to keep going. I was taking notes. From the representative telling us about the politics, from the doctor talking about the science, which I did not understand at all, except that marijuana good, Benadryl bad, Tylenol probably bad as well. But the one thing I took home from everyone, from Amy, from Leslie, it's about the humanity, it's about the person, it's about us. And there are these ridiculous stereotypes, these stigmas associated with people that use marijuana, they're just wrong. And when elected officials think about marijuana, folks, they don't think about Leslie's child or Amy's child or Vincent. No, they think about these ideas they see from television, these stoners, these folks that don't exist. You know, Ann Lee, I love it when you speak. I love your Texas voice. I want to come here and just listen to it all the time. But hearing that Republicans are against marijuana prohibition is powerful because that's not what you think about. You know, so in Texas right now, I have the pleasure of working with some amazing folks. Heather Fazio is here, who's a phenomenal lightning rod. She is with MPP, but also leading this other coalition, Texans for a Responsible Marijuana Policy. So definitely see her. She's phenomenal. She'll be at the front of medical marijuana being legalized. Also, Cheyenne Weldon is here as well. NORML, who's been pushing forward for the last decade, if not longer. Amazing work. And also Zoe Russell, who's been called up before, and Ann Lee, of course. And these are the folks. Vincent as well, and Dave Bass, I'm not sure it's here. These are the folks doing the work every single day, getting rid of that stigma and those stereotypes and saying medical marijuana for Texans means me. Yes. Means it's between living and dying. I had to tell my mom what my job was about a year ago when I took this job. I switched from labor organizing to this, and I went home to my Mexican mother, who's very sweet and very humble and very simple, and she says, "Mijo, ¿qué haces?" And I say in Spanish, "Mamá, yo estoy legalizando la marihuana." And her face dropped, and she was like, ¿Qué? Pero fuiste a colegio? And I was like, I did go to college, Mom. I went to college so I could legalize marijuana. And after she wept for the first 15 minutes and allowed me to speak, I was able to explain to her, "Mom, I do it because I love people. People are suffering, and legalizing marijuana means people get to live." And Texans are enormous. This podium is bigger than my apartment. Everything here is big. And I assume your hearts are just as big, and it is time. There's no reason Florida should beat you. I'm sad it didn't pass, but at the same time, it gives you the opportunity to beat them. And I really believe Texas is going to be 24. I believe working with groups like MAMA, working with groups like Mothers Against Teen Violence, working with groups against like Progress Texas, and Republicans Against Marijuana Prohibition at the same table. Who would ever think? A hugely leftist group and a libertarian group are at the same table advocating for the same thing. Yes. And it's exactly what's happening. And it's exactly why it's going to pass, and we need it to pass. And Dr. Martin, you're brilliant. Everything you say, I love it. I kind of want to come here and try to be a fellow. No interest in going to grad school, but maybe we can work something out. You said something brilliant in this piece that he wrote 2 days ago for Veterans Day, and I wish there was a vet on stage, because if there's somebody who really, really resonates with, there's vets in the audience. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. You know, as another Brooklynite, my view of Texas is that you're tough. Texas is tough. You like to lead. You like to do your own thing. You protect your civil liberties. And I think of Texas as a place where veterans go on vacation, like this is their paradise. But you're not taking care of your veterans. Dr. Martin, you wrote 2 million veterans have come back from Iraq and Afghanistan, 1 million come back suffered, either physically or psychologically. And this quote, it was so moving to me, I wrote your quote down. So I'm gonna give you credit instead of plagiarizing and say I said it myself. And it's very well done. Where is it? You wrote, "Cannabis cannot restore missing limbs or heal skin scarred by fire, but it can help physically or psychologically wounded veterans live a more normal life." And that's the bottom line. We're not talking about getting high or smoking weed. We're talking about folks trying to live a more normal life. And that's what we're doing. Our coalitions, Texas for Medical Freedom, Texans for Responsible Marijuana Policy, is all about folks living a more normal life. Reducing the stigma, reducing those stereotypes, saying I'm a proud Texan, there's no reason I should move to Colorado. I should have access to the medicine that helps my son, my daughter, myself, the people that I love. And that message is what's going to ensure that we pass medical marijuana in Texas and in every other state, but it has to happen here. It has to happen in 2015 because you guys have sessions every 2 years and you can't wait another 2 years for it to happen. Too many people are dying. So I just want to end again by pointing out Heather Fazio, please talk to her. To Cheyenne Weldon, please talk to her. To AmyLou, Zoe Russell, talk to them as well. They will be here. To Bill Martin, please talk to him as well. About how to make this happen, how to move this, how to go forward. So I want to end by asking you a question. Is Texas going to be the 24th state to legalize medical marijuana? Yes! I didn't hear anything at all. Is Texas going to legalize medical marijuana? Yes! Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeronimo. Let me say we did not simply forget the veterans. I meant to call you when I was showing you the front page of our program. If you go down to the bottom of that front page, on the drug policy program, the website. On the front page of the drug policy website, down at the bottom left, there's a video of a program we had here in July. It was a part of Texas Monthly Talks that came out after my June article on War Without End. Here we're right here. So there is somebody behind our curtain that we pay attention to. The people here are just so wonderful to work with. The people that plan the programs, that do the graphics for our programs, that do keep all the AV going and do everything we need to do. It's a wonderful place to be. But here, this video here, I'm not even touching anything. They're just doing it for me. We had an hour and a half program just dedicated to PTSD and the use of cannabis for it. So if you want to, and this is the founding director of the Baker Institute, Ambassador Jerigian, introducing the program that night. So we certainly are paying attention to that. Well, we had put the tables up here in case there were time, but we have decided we're going to bring the program to a close now. We have people who are going to be going back to Austin, and Albuquerque, and Dallas, and others who just would like to stop. But I want to thank our speakers, all of you who have just done so well, and have provided us with a stimulating evening. I want to thank those of you of our audience for coming, and I know that a lot of this audience was generated by people in various parts of the state who have said, go, 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 and have told about what we're doing here tonight and what we're all trying to do together. By this turnout, you validate the efforts of this coalition, and you validate what we're trying to do here at the Baker Institute. So I invite you to continue to pay attention to our efforts here. We do not have to go home right now if you don't want to. We're right across that direction here at the building just catty-cornered over here. That's our student center, and at the basement of the student center is a place called Willie's Pub. It is named for William Marsh Rice, the founder of Rice University, or the endower and the donor, the beneficiary. He gave us the money a long time ago. I'm sure I know the right word, and we'll get to it. A benefactor, that's it. Anyway, you pay your own way, but the prices are reasonable, and if you want to go there and visit with each other, and some of us will be there, feel free to do that. But just thank you so much for coming out. Thank of our speakers. It's been good to be here. Good night.